Hello and welcome to another book launch. We're so excited to have you here today. This month we have a children's book, A Wonderful Middle Grade by Mike Steele. Mike, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
Wonderful. It's great to have you here. So we fell in love with this book when we read it, when it was submitted. And a lot of the reason why we fell in love with it is because it really reminds me of a Beverly Cleary type of book. It really has that kind of a vibe. So any teachers out there, this is definitely a book you want to have in your classrooms because it's great read. It's great read aloud for students and a great read for them for independent read as well. But Mike, tell me what made you want to write this specific genre?
So I've always loved middle grade since I was a middle grade reader, and I knew when I was reading middle grade that someday that was what I wanted to write. And then I became an elementary school teacher, and now I'm an elementary school librarian, and still middle grade is always what I gravitate toward. I do read adult books sometimes, but I just love middle grade, and so I've always known that that was what I wanted to try writing. And in terms of historical fiction, because Not Lucille is historical fiction, I've always been drawn to realistic and historical fiction in general. And so that's what drew me to the genre.
I think that's great. And kids need to learn more about history. And I just don't think there's a lot of books out there that speak to that. And especially the era that Not Lucille is. So it's set in 1931. And I think that's a unique era for kids to read because I don't think it's taught as much in elementary schools. I don't think they know as much about that era. And I think this is a good way to expose them to what happened in that time period.
Yeah, actually, when I was younger, it was a really prominent era to learn about from family because family that lived through that era was still alive. My grandparents lived through the 1930s. They were kids in the 1930s. And but that generation is now largely gone. So I do hear some rumblings in the publishing world that is going to make a comeback and going to be a big thing in the near future. I hope so. Fingers crossed.
Definitely, definitely. And I think this is a great book to have in a classroom library, even as an independent read for students.
I think so as well. I think it could be a great book club book,
Yes,
fourth or fifth grade level reading, and I think also a great read aloud for teachers, classroom teachers to use.
definitely. And there's a lot more to the story than just the history. There's a lot more that they can really discuss with students. And I think some of the students would also see themselves in Lucille.
I think so as well. I have a lot of students myself, about 240 of them a year, and there are a lot of students that I have that remind me of Lucy, because her name is not Lucille.
No, that's very true. So, can you show us the cover? Because the cover is gorgeous.
Yes, it is.
Look at that. I love how that turned out. That is absolutely gorgeous. And that's exactly how you envision her.
Yeah. Well, I should say I just knew she was short and she had wild red hair, and I really wanted an artist to take that and run with it. And Kelsey Grass, the cover artist, she did an amazing job.
She did. She really did. She really brought your vision to life.
Yes.
So, could you tell us a little bit about how you developed the character of Lucy?
Yes, it's a long story. When I was a little kid growing up, there was a park in the city of Trenton. I'm from New Jersey, grew up right outside of Trenton, and there's a park in the city that a lot of residents in the area called the Deefies. And I always thought it was such a strange name for a park. And I remember my grandparents talking about the Deefies, my aunts and uncles talking about the Deefies, and I was like, what is this place? So I did a little digging in young adulthood and discovered that it used to be the campus of a school for the deaf. And I'm not sure. I did a lot of research, but I could not figure out if deafes and deaf was connected. But in terms of the story, I did make that connection. And the children in the 1930s in the book are calling the campus of the school for the deaf the deafes. And and so once I learned that this was the campus of a school for the deaf, I thought to myself, that's really interesting to have this campus in the middle of what was, in the era of the story, an Italian American neighborhood in Trenton. And I thought to myself, how would the residents of this neighborhood, and it was something like 99% of the residents in this neighborhood were Italian American at the time, how would they have interacted with the deaf students on this campus? Um, and then it made me start thinking about my own grandparents and my grandmother, whose name was Lucy, who inspired the main character. She was very talkative. And I thought, wouldn't it have been interesting if a talkative little girl snuck onto the campus of a school for the deaf and met another girl who couldn't talk at all?
Mhm.
And I kind of sat on that concept for about 7 or 8 years, thinking, I got to turn this into a book. This is going to be my first book. I've got to do this. And then COVID hit, and I was locked down in my condo in Brooklyn, and I had a lot of time to do something with. And I said, I'm going to write this story. And I thought, I was like, I'll write a chapter a week. And it turned into a chapter a day. And then I wrote the first draft in about 2.5 weeks.
Oh, wow.
I was doing grad school full time at the time, so I was just sitting there. Mornings was grad school work. Afternoon until I went to bed was knocking out this first draft. And it's been since then that I've continued to edit and edit and edit. And I think it's draft 27 that is going to print tomorrow.
That is so awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was quite a journey, and I learned a lot through it.
Yeah, that first book will really teach you a lot. But the fact that you have so much in this book that's so easily intertwined, because it's not just Lucy's story, it's her parents, it's her brothers, it's so much deeper than just Lucy and the Deefies.
Yeah, I've had several beta readers, they're readers who read drafts throughout the process of drafting, give so much feedback saying, like, this is so interesting because it is not just Lucy's story. She's got 3 brothers, she's got 2 parents, she's got a best friend at the school she goes to, she makes a friend at this school for the deaf, and it's kind of all of their stories and how they all interact with one another as characters.
And it's so smooth. It's just put together in such a way that it just flows.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So it's great. Well, I am trying to monitor our YouTube. For some reason, it's not appearing on our screen on Restream, but I do have it up on my phone. So if I'm glancing away, it's because I'm looking at a comment on YouTube. So if you are watching, please leave comments and congratulations. And any questions you have, we will get to those questions. So Kristen says, yay, Mike, so proud of you. Can't wait to read it.
Oh, thank you.
And we have another question that says that, okay, someone's commenting about how many drafts. Like, that is a lot of drafts.
It was a lot. I've read this story way too many times.
It is, but it takes a lot of drafts to get it right. And that just means that you were dedicated to getting the story the right way.
I really did want to make it the best it possibly could be, yes.
And I think you succeeded. It's an amazing story.
Thank you.
If you have any more questions, please put them in the chat. But would you like to read a little bit for us?
Sure. I selected a passage from the first chapter, and it's the last couple of pages of that first chapter. And at this point in the story, not too much has happened, but it's the very first day of school. Lucy's is in 5th grade. She's about to enter 5th grade. And Lucy and her best friend, Anne, they're about to enter the school building, and they're excited because this year the class is going to be on the top floor of the building, and they're hoping that they can see very far when they look out the windows. So Lucy linked her left arm into Anne's right and pulled her toward the horde of warm bodies pouring into the building and out of the scorching sun. The girls made their way into a tight stairwell, dense with the bleachy aroma it always had on the first day of school. Hopefully the students could get the smell back to normal soon. When the girls reached the 4th floor, a batch of younger kids pushed past and out of the stairwell, surely annoyed to be trapped in the limbo of 3rd and 4th grade. Then, even sweatier than before, Lucy and Anne continued up to where the stairs came to an end. They'd reached a square, brown-washed hall. Its perimeter was lined with classrooms on 3 sides and a series of storage rooms and washrooms along the 4th, the top floor. I don't know what the big deal is, Anne whined. It looks the same as the other floors. Since apathy wasn't in her nature, she reminded herself, ugh, we have Miss Gillingham. Kids swirled in all directions, searching for their own classrooms and showing no concern on Anne's behalf. Lucy wasn't concerned either. Do you think we'll be able to see Philadelphia from 5A? Her mind was on one thing and one thing only. I doubt we'll be able to see past more than a few blocks. Those buildings at the Deefies block everything. Lucy spotted classroom 5A across the hall and raced toward it, turning over her shoulder to yell, "My mom gets mad when we call it the Deef." Then she felt herself collide with something. She splattered to the floor and landed firmly on her butt, dizzily looking up in time to see what appeared to be the back end of a woolly mammoth. When her eyes finally focused, she realized she wasn't staring at a woolly mammoth at all, just a large boy, chopped brown hair shooting from his head in a bunch of directions. He wore brown slacks, brown shoes, and a button-up shirt so tan it might as well have been brown. He would have blended into the brown walls if he wasn't so overbearingly large. The mammoth boy turned and crossed his thick arms. "Little girl, you're on the wrong floor." Lucy sprang to her feet and threw her hands to her hips. "I am not." She had a habit of dragging out her words when she wanted to be taken seriously. The mammoth boy looked down at her. Lucy glared up at him. Her nose was in line with where she knew his belly button must be. "This floor is for 5th and 6th graders," the mammoth boy said. "I'm in 5th grade." The mammoth boy snorted and called to two not nearly as large boys standing nearby. "Frank, Guido, this kid says she's in 5th grade." One of the boys looked at Lucy and laughed a high-pitched chirp. The other joined with a low croak. The mammoth boy addressed his herd. "Are 5th graders supposed to be this small?" He must have been a 6th grader, and he seemed to think himself quite special for it. Lucy huffed. She wasn't going to let some overgrown kid, not much older than herself, make fun of her to his friends. "You're lucky I'm small. If I could reach, I'd punch you right in the nose." That would set him straight. "Fists as small as yours couldn't hurt a flea, little girl." One of the other boys chirped in agreement. It was either Frank or Guido, but distinguishing between the two wasn't one of Lucy's priorities. Anne yanked the back of Lucy's special occasion dress. "Let's go," she whispered. "We'll be late." "Go on," the mammoth boy chimed in, "and take big steps with those short legs." The whole herd laughed. They sounded like a small zoo. Lucy wrenched her lips together, trying to think of a zinger to shoot back when the late bell rang. "See you around, little girl," the mammoth boy called. Lucy shouted an "I sure hope not" over her shoulder as she pulled open the door to classroom 5A. Inside, she found her classmates standing at attention along the front of the room. Miss Gillingham paused mid-sentence. She glared down her long nose at Lucy and Anne. "If you are going to be tardy, at least have the courtesy to enter silently," she barked. Someone in the lineup snickered, but quickly quieted when Miss Gillingham whipped her head around to see who it was. The group straightened like army recruits in special occasion uniforms. "Yes, ma'am, sorry, ma'am," Anne muttered, even though she wasn't the one who'd shouted. Lucy could see some of her classmates looking at her out of the corners of their eyes. She knew what they were thinking. Lucy's in trouble. Lucy's always in trouble. She looked down. Every now and then, when words did manage to fail, the scuff marks on the toes of her shoes seemed to become very interesting. Miss Gillingham hobbled to the pair, not bending her knees. The thick wool skirt of her morbidly gray dress was so stiff it might as well have been a part of her own body. "Names?" "Anne Salvatore." "Anne, I accept your apology. See to it you are not tardy again." The teacher turned to Lucy. "And you are?" "Lucy, Contento. I'm sorry too." She wasn't really. It was only a few seconds into the school year. She couldn't have interrupted anything that important. Still, apologizing might keep her out of trouble. "Are you related to Ferdinand Contento?" "Freddie's my older brother," Lucy replied, continuing to avoid Miss Gillingham's eyes. Hopefully the teacher was asking because she had fond memories of, "When he was my student, he was tardy every day." With that, Miss Gillingham turned and hobbled away. For finally reaching the top, Lucy sure felt like she was on the bottom.
Mm. I love that. It's a great start to the story.
Thank you. Yes, I knew I had to establish that student and teacher relationship. That's so important at that.
It's crucial to the story. It really is in so many ways.
Yeah.
And Lucy's personality really comes out in that scene.
Yes, yes. She's as it says in the passage I just read,
Mhm.
she's always in trouble. And a lot of times she's not realizing what she's doing in the moment. And so that
Mhm.
trouble kind of sneaks up on her and surprises her. And then she's like, ooh, I
She's
better
not
have
she's
my
not seeking out the trouble. She just ends up in it.
yes, constantly, constantly.
Definitely. Well, we have a lot of congratulations that you can read on YouTube. So please go back to the YouTube channel after this and see other
Oh,
congratulations.
I
There's a lot of them. A lot of people are so proud of you.
oh, I'm excited. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So, but we do have a question. What was your favorite part of working this story?
Um, I find there's some writers who are so excited to actually sit down and write, and they just can't help but write every single day. And for me, the writing is the hard part. My favorite part is the editing, going
Mm,
back and fixing and reorganizing and making everything happen. Shortening some things, lengthening some things, moving things around, and just making the flow of the story as tight as it can be. That's my favorite part.
You had said this was your first novel, but this isn't your first attempt at writing or even successful attempt. You have other things that you've had published before, I believe. Uh,
Yeah, I have 8 plays
mhm.
published in the children's theater for young audiences school play market, and I believe my first play was published in 2011, so it's been quite a while. And this was a shift for me from plays to novels. It's an interesting journey.
It's interesting because we have another author who is switching from books to screenwriting.
Ah,
And she's actually in the process of screenwriting her books, and they've won multiple awards already for her screenwriting, which is just phenomenal. I know she said that she had to switch her thinking and learn a different way of writing when she switched to the screenwriting. Did you feel that when you were going from writing plays to writing novels?
yeah, somewhat. I mean, I've always enjoyed reading novels. I'm a school librarian. I read many, many middle grade novels in my life. So I've kind of internalized what happens, without any formal training in middle grade writing.
Mhm.
But when it comes to writing plays, you're strictly writing dialogue and a tiny, tiny bit of stage direction, which is just physical movement. You're not really writing what the characters are thinking. That's
Mhm.
left up to the actors and the directors. And so, as playwrights, we don't put that into the script at all. But when it comes to novels, what
Mhm.
the characters are thinking is really, really important. So, I had to purposefully remind myself as I was writing, say what Lucy is thinking or show what Lucy is thinking in some way or the other characters in the
Right.
story.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a shift there, but I think both are beneficial because when you're writing plays, it does help you with the dialogue, and that makes it easier when you're writing your novel with it, as far as the dialogue is concerned. And I think it might be easier going from plays to novels because you're adding more. But when you're used to writing novels and then you're going to screenwriting or plays, you're you're not including as much, so it's a different way of thinking.
Yes, I'm not super familiar with screenwriting. You can definitely, movies have very, very short scenes, um, and novels could have very, very long scenes. So just figuring out the pacing of when you're shifting from one medium to another can be a
Mhm.
challenge, I'm sure.
Definitely. So Cassie wants to know, do you have a favorite spot to write?
I wrote this entire novel on my couch in Brooklyn. Well, I wouldn't say it was my favorite spot, but it was the only spot. I was living in about 400 square feet. So there weren't many spots to write, but now I live somewhere else. I live in a house now, a single family home, and I have a desk. I don't
Mhm.
know if it's my favorite spot to write, but it's the spot that I write.
There you go. Yeah, you do the spot that works. So let me see if we have any other questions. If you have any other questions, please put them in the chat. We will get to them as soon as we can. Um, so what's next for you besides this book? Are you working on anything now?
I've got some ideas stirring in my mind, all middle grade. I would like to continue to write middle grade. Not that I
Okay,
don't love writing those plays, but I just got some middle grade ideas floating around in my mind, and I'm
that's great.
hoping this summer,
Mhm.
just started for me last week as a teacher. I'm hoping that I can crank a first draft out.
That is fabulous. Are you sticking with historical, or are you going a different way?
I think I'm going to do contemporary
Oh,
realistic.
nice.
Yeah,
Very nice. Would you like to read another excerpt?
sure. I
Awesome.
have an excerpt from the second chapter.
Okay.
Um, and Lucy, she's just finished that first day of school, and she's meeting her friends, and it's very, very hot that day. And she's standing outside of the Trenton Academy for the Deaf, which is what the school that the Deefies is the nickname
Mhm.
for. And she kind of stopped to catch her breath, and then she notices that she's in front of the campus. The Deefies sprawled what would have been 3 blocks if it wasn't entirely walled off from the rest of the city. Its campus had sat in the middle of Chambersburg for Lucy's entire life. Based on the look of the rusty fence that kept it from encroaching on the sidewalk, it had been around for a long time before that. Funny that in the hundreds of times Lucy had walked past, she'd never done more than peek through the fence's diamond netting. What secrets were behind those laurel hedges, their thin branches barring out the rest of the city? There was no time to sit and wonder. Lucy was late. She hopped to her feet and crossed the street. Then she stopped. If she continued along the sidewalk, it would take at least another 10 minutes to get around the campus. Cutting across would save time. Exactly how much, she wasn't sure. There was only one way to find out. Lucy smiled to herself. All she needed was a way onto the campus. She craned her neck up. The top of the fence was no more than 2 feet above her head, an easy climb even in her special occasion dress. She slowly reached out to touch the metal web before pausing, worried some unseen gatekeeper might appear. Nothing. She glanced left and right. No pedestrians, no buses. Few people in Trenton owned cars. Trolleys weren't a concern so far from downtown. It was unlikely anyone on her side of the fence would spy what she planned to do. Lucy sucked in her breath and climbed, scuffing her shoes even more as the leather toes gripped the corroded metal. She kicked over the top and scurried down before pushing through the hedges. Then she crouched before anyone on campus could spot her. No one could, though. She was alone. The backs of 4 rectangular brick buildings stretched ahead. The one at the end of the row was widest. It seemed to be a main building of some sort. Maybe it housed classrooms. Lucy couldn't imagine what purposes the other buildings served. They were tall and thin, not as tall as Robbins Elementary, but at least 3 stories, if not 4. On the right lay a bright field and garden. A ramshackle baseball backstop stood in the far corner. Small wooden outbuildings sat in another corner. Lucy had a sudden itch to explore this new world, this island floating in the concrete waters of her city. She snuck across the backs of the buildings, fingering the chalky walls along the way. The walls looked quite simply like the walls of any other brick buildings. This seemed to be the only reminder that she was still in Chambersburg. Most of the windows high above her head were open, and faint noises drifted out. People were moving inside, banging, laughing, reminding her she didn't want to be caught. When she got to the final building, the wide one, she spotted a row of 3 very low windows. They were so low, in fact, that only her knees would have been able to see into the bottom floor, which was partially below ground. Unlike the windows on the floors above them, these were closed. Was anything interesting happening behind them? Lucy knelt at the closest window to look. On the other side was a classroom. It was empty, but otherwise like all the classrooms in which she'd ever been at Robbins Elementary. Desks sat in rows, a chalkboard at the front of the room, a cloakroom along the side. The walls were beige, the trim brown. A faded American flag hung on a pole jutting from one of the corners. The only difference between this classroom and classroom 5A was the huge mirror hanging on the wall next to the cloakroom entrance. The mirror must have been at least 5 feet long. Why was it there? Would a whole class of kids admire themselves at the same time? Lucy crawled to the second window. Another classroom, same as the first. She was treated to a surprise at the final window when her knee landed in a bare and muddy strip in the lawn. She groaned as she felt the wet earth push through the weave of her dress, soaking through to her skin. A whole patch of polka dots had been blinded by brown sludge. Lucy knew she should find a way to rinse out her dress before her mother could see the stain. She peeked through the window instead. Another classroom, just like the others. No, not exactly. At a small table in the corner of the room sat a girl about her own age, with long blonde hair hanging nearly to her lap. Lucy stared. The blonde girl had 2 books open in front of her. She looked in one and worked in the other. Her eyes went back and forth. First book, second book. First book, second book. First book, second book. Window. Lucy. The blonde girl looked directly into Lucy's eyes. Her mouth opened. She dropped the pencil in her hand. That's when Lucy ran back to the fence with all her might, mud slinging from her purple polka dot special occasion dress.
I love it. You really paint a picture in your writing, so people can really feel like they're in the scene.
Oh, thank you.
So important.
I try. That was an interesting chapter to write because there's not much dialogue in that chapter, and dialogue being what I was so used to writing prior to this. So I'm glad that it worked out.
And it just shows you don't always need dialogue to really understand what the characters are thinking and doing. And dialogue isn't always going to push the story forward.
Yeah,
So,
I actually one of my editors that I worked with told me, she said as I was reading, I was trying to understand what you were doing with the dialogue, and this was before I had a lot of description. I actually was a very early draft where there wasn't as much of this type of description, and she said I was trying to figure out, and it struck me about a quarter of the way through the book that you use dialogue when it's important to use the dialogue. It's when it's the most important thing on the page, and I never thought about that before, but she was probably right.
yeah, I agree. Well, we are so excited this book is out, and thank you everyone for tuning in. We were so glad to have you here with Mike to celebrate. His book is out tomorrow, so please, in ebook and in paperback, go out and purchase it. It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes & Noble, it's on all the ebook sites, so go and find it. And special news for you guys, in July, the ebook is 50% off on Smashwords. So if you're a Smashwords reader, pick it up in July for 50% off. So that's exciting, and tell people about it, especially if you know teachers. We want to get this in classrooms. So let your teacher friends know. And I know I've let my teacher friends know, and they've already said they want to read it in their classrooms next year's read alouds. So we're excited to get that stocked in some classrooms around here, but we want it all over the place. So let people know about this fabulous book. So Mike, we're very glad that you were here today. We learned a lot about you and about this book. We're so excited.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for tuning in.
Definitely. And we will be back next month with Kyle Willis and his book, Jason Phoenix and the Demon Lamp. So that's coming as a YA book coming out next month. So thank you for tuning in, and go buy some books and happy reading.